17 million pounds. That's what it costs, just to say yes. Not a transfer fee, not a stadium upgrade. That's the compensation another club demands before you're even allowed to walk into your new office. You haven't managed a single training session yet. You haven't picked a single starting 11. And you already owe someone 17 million pounds just for the privilege of showing up. Welcome to your life as the new manager of Manchester City. Here's the job offer nobody warns you about. You're not just replacing a manager. You're replacing the most successful manager in the history of English football. A man who spent 10 years turning one club into a machine that won 17 major trophies. A man who is statistically the best manager the Premier League has ever seen. And the plan is simple. Don't lose. Sounds easy. It isn't, because don't lose actually means something much harder. Don't be the reason this era ends. But that's only half the story, because the era you're inheriting didn't end quietly. It ended the way these things rarely do at a club this dominant, with a trophy drought that, by Manchester City's own insane standards, counted as a crisis. Back-to-back seasons without the league title. A team that had, for the first time in a decade, stopped looking unbeatable. You're not just following a legend. You're following a legend on the way down. So here's your actual deal. 3 years. Not 5, not 10. 3. Compare that to your predecessor's decade-long reign, and the message is obvious. Even before your first match, the club has already told you how much patience you're working with. It's not rebuild the empire, it's prove it quickly. And you already know exactly what this feels like, because you've been on the other side of this seat before. You spent time here as an assistant, years ago, during the club's most dominant stretch, including the year they won an unprecedented treble. You know where the trophies are kept. You know what winning here is supposed to look like. That's supposed to be an advantage. It might actually be the most dangerous thing about this job. Now here's the part of the story that almost derails everything before it even starts. To take this job, you had to leave your old one, mid-season, with years still left on your contract. Your old club didn't find out through a formal meeting. They found out that you were gone, abruptly on New Year's Day, in the middle of a title race they were still fighting. They call it a resignation. Some call it something closer to a walkout. Either way, it doesn't matter what word gets used, because now there's a bill. Your old employer says you broke a binding contract to chase this opportunity, and under football's rules, someone has to pay for that broken promise. That's where the 17 million pounds comes from. Split between you and your new club, as compensation for a departure your old employer never agreed to. You haven't managed a single match yet, and you've already generated a legal settlement. But let's talk about the actual job, because this is where things get complicated fast. Your predecessor built a specific kind of team, positional, possession-obsessed, players who could function as an extension of his exact instructions. It's a system so demanding that most managers in the world couldn't run it. He could, for 10 years straight. Now you have to decide something almost no manager in world football is ever asked to decide. Do you keep running someone else's masterpiece, knowing you'll always be compared to the original? Or do you tear it up and build something that's actually yours, knowing that if it fails, there will be no excuse left to hide behind? Every training session for the next several months is that question, answered one drill at a time. Then comes the part of this job that has nothing to do with football at all. And it's the part that could end your entire project before it even gets going. While you're picking your captain and settling on a starting back four, there's a sealed legal verdict hanging over the entire club. Years ago, before you ever arrived, the club was formally accused of over 100 breaches of football's financial rules, accusations covering nearly a decade of spending, sponsorship deals, and disclosures. The club denies every single one of them. The hearing wrapped up more than a year before you took this job. Since then, silence. No ruling, no timeline, just a panel somewhere deciding a verdict that could range from a fine to a documented history-altering points deduction to something almost unthinkable for a club this size. You didn't create this problem, you inherited it. And if the ruling lands badly, you could start your very first season not chasing a title, but climbing out of a hole that isn't even yours. Let's talk about money, because at this club, money isn't background noise. It's the whole plot. You're now in charge of a squad built over a decade with resources most clubs on earth can only dream about. Every transfer window, you're not shopping in the normal market. You're shopping in a market where the most expensive available player is treated as a reasonable, sensible signing. That sounds like an advantage, and it is, until you realize what it actually means for you personally. Spending big isn't a bonus tool in this job. It's the baseline expectation. Any other manager who finishes second gets praised for a strong season. You finish second, and it gets treated as the first sign that the empire is cracking. The same resources that make this the most desirable job in football are exactly what make it one of the most unforgiving. Here's the part nobody puts in the job description. The emotional temperature of an entire city now runs through you. Manchester City's identity for the last decade has quietly become the club that doesn't lose. Not the club that plays well, not even the club that wins trophies, though it's won plenty. A specific promise this fan base has been trained to expect is inevitability. You are now personally responsible for maintaining an illusion that took 10 years to build and can unravel in about 6 bad weeks. One rough patch in October, and pundits everywhere will ask the exact same question, in the exact same tone: is the empire finally over? You didn't build that pressure. You just inherited the job of carrying it. Then there's the part of the job that's less about tactics and more about psychology. Every single player in your dressing room has spent years being coached by someone else, someone whose way of working became instinct to them. You're not just introducing new tactics. You're asking a squad full of title winners and internationals to unlearn 10 years of muscle memory and trust a completely different voice instead. Some will adapt immediately. Some won't adapt at all. And you'll find out which is which in real time, in front of 80,000 people and a television audience of hundreds of millions, with almost zero room for a slow start. Here's the paradox at the center of this entire job, and it's the one that actually decides whether you survive it. If you win immediately, the story becomes, he simply inherited a machine and pressed play. If you lose early, the story becomes, he was never good enough to fill those shoes. There is no version of this job where the credit is entirely yours, but there is absolutely a version where all the blame is. That's the trade every manager makes the moment they accept a job this big: unlimited resources, unlimited expectations, and almost no version of success that isn't immediately compared to somebody else's decade. So here's what your life actually looks like now. You're managing the richest, most successful club project of the last 10 years, at the exact moment its most successful era just ended. You're carrying a £17 million goodwill bill before your first whistle. You're running training sessions under the shadow of a legal verdict you had no part in creating that could reshape the entire club overnight. And every single result, good or bad, will be measured against a legacy you didn't build and can't fully escape. This is, by every financial measure, one of the best jobs in world football, and by every psychological measure, one of the most exposed. And maybe that's the real lesson hiding inside this job. We tend to imagine that inheriting the best version of something is the easiest way to succeed. More money, more talent, more trophies already on the shelf. But the closer you look at a job like this, the clearer it becomes. Inheriting greatness doesn't remove pressure. It just changes what the pressure is made of. It's no longer can you build something. It's can you avoid being the one who's remembered for losing it. Somewhere in England right now, a man is walking down that tunnel for the first time, about to find out exactly which one of those two stories he's going to become.